hello and welcome to our WVIK QCSO Signature Series preview. I'm Brian Baxter, Executive Director of the QCSO, and today I am very excited to be joined by our wonderful artists for this concert, our QCSO Concertmaster Naha Greenholtz and our wonderful pianist Marian Lee. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Hi, Brian.
Hello. So on Friday, October 23rd at 7:30, we're presenting what's going to be a really exciting concert at the Figge Art Museum. In-person tickets are sold out. The limited in-person tickets we're able to offer are sold out, but we do have unlimited digital access that can be purchased. And a lot of people have been buying that too. So definitely check it out. You'll be able to live stream the show and then have access for 30 days afterward. And I was thinking before we kind of discuss the exciting program you've got planned, I was curious to ask you both what it's been like to perform in this kind of strange pandemic environment. And then on top of that, like, what does it mean to you to be able to make music live now? Even though it's been fairly different than what we were used to pre-March of this year.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd say leading up to our recital in August, I was a little nervous. You know, I hadn't gone 5 months without performing since God knows how long. my whole life it felt like. But you know, as soon as we got on that stage with the lights and a warm reception of the audience, and then you know, falling through to Riverfront Props and Masterworks 1, it's just been so wonderful to like keep coming back to my second home of Quad Cities and be embraced by the community, and to have live concerts is really sustaining. It's really gives meaning to my life. And to not have that was such an emptiness. And so I'm so grateful to be able to give these concerts.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I just like Naha. I mean, you know, we were supposed to play that program back in March, and
Right.
you know, we decided to postpone it to the summer, and we weren't sure quite when to do it, and then if we did it, who would show up, you know, who'd be brave enough to show up. So I was really grateful that, number one, we had a venue that could hold people and safely, and then yeah, to get out there in front of a live audience was so special. And you forget how special that is, to be out on stage and to be really embraced. I did feel a really warm embrace from that audience, and I could tell they really appreciated us being there. And it was a very special moment, and really intense, you know. And besides, I think this is the first time we had to live stream a concert, so that was another level that we hadn't done before. So I think it made us nervous, but honestly, you know, once we start the music, it kind of feels back to normal, and it was a lot of fun, you know. And we got to play some cool composers that we hadn't before, and yeah, I loved it.
That's great. Yeah. And I know from speaking to audience members at both the performance you all did in August, as well as the couple of orchestra performances we've had so far, I mean, you know, everyone is just kind of yearning for social connection. And of course, that's what our concerts are. They're social events. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's why we're doing everything we can to do them and do them safely. So we appreciate the artistry that both of you bring to it. And this program on October 23rd is a pretty exciting one. And we've been able to, you know, there's been some changes to a lot of our programming to kind of follow the best practices for COVID precautions. But this one we were able to mostly kind of preserve in your original conception. And the performance will open with this Mozart sonata in G major. And I am, you know, curious to hear a bit about the style of this first piece and how you guys are approaching it. You know, I think this was, if my research is correct, this is kind of an earlier work of Mozart's, possibly one of the earlier ones where your two instruments are really more co-equals rather than it's a violin solo with piano accompaniment. So I don't know if you guys want to talk a little bit about this Mozart and how you're approaching it and kind of the style of it.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, with we kind of want to go with like a inspiring Beethoven kind of theme, Beethoven 250 and all that. And so we have these two sonatas, the Mozart and the Beethoven, and they're both, it's in the evolution of the violin and piano sonata. It's interesting that it really started, the genre really started as piano with violin accompaniment. And so those were Mozart's early works, which he kind of not ignored, but he considered this like one of his first opuses, this opus 301, in that he really incorporated the two voices together. And then we'll talk about the Beethoven a little more later on, but Beethoven's opus 30, 1, 2, and 3, we're playing the second one in C minor. Those pieces were also considered piano sonatas with violin accompaniment. And so it's kind of interesting that in these years, there was still experimentation going on with like what the roles of the performers were. Yeah, and Marian wants to chime in on the Mozart here.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I teach a music appreciation class, and we had just finished with the Baroque period, and you know, they had sonatas back then, but it was the keyboard had a very different role. It was really figured bass and pure accompaniment, just harmony, right? And so yes, in the classical period with Mozart and Beethoven, you know, as you both were saying, that there's finally this kind of co-partnership between the two, and that is very evident, and so thank you, Naha, for picking these violin sonatas. I've been really enjoying them, and I think for me the Mozart is unusual in that it's two movements as opposed to
right. It is two movements, yeah.
So it's a nice opener, actually. Yeah, Mozart was both composers are very similar in that both were incredible pianists, which is maybe why piano is listed first before the violin, but then they were both equal, you know, wonderful violinists as well. So they really understood the violin instrument extremely well. So I think that's why they both wrote such incredible, you know, catalog of violin sonatas.
Yeah, it's a really nice piece. And for those who are keeping score at home, I believe Mozart was 22 when he wrote this piece. So it's just kind of, I'm always curious as to how old the composers are when they write various pieces. So, and of course, Mozart didn't live that long, certainly by today's standards. But still, being 22, you're 22, and I think the fact that he was like, what I read during this time, he was traveling around, you know, trying to get a different job, like he had left the court. So it's just kind of interesting to think that he was already an extremely accomplished performing musician at that point, but he's calling this like Opus 1, right? Or however he's terming it. So it's kind of interesting, a unique way to start, a cool way to start the program, definitely. So if I can jump to our next piece, Jesse Jones, who is a living composer. So it's really nice that you've paired a contemporary modern voice in between these two old voices, Mozart and Beethoven. So you know, maybe tell us a little bit about this work, Scherzo, after Beethoven. So clearly by its title, it's related to or inspired by Beethoven. But yeah, tell us a little bit about that work. And I think we'd also be curious to hear a little bit more about Jesse himself.
Yeah, the title gives it away a little bit, but this one's I was researching, you know, Beethoven adjacent, Beethoven inspired kind of modern works, and this one really caught my ear. It's a kind of a quirky, out there piece. It's a fun palate cleanser before this like really stormy and dramatic sonata we're going to play by Beethoven, and it it jumps around and uses themes by Beethoven. It's a theme in variations essentially, which is a favored form of both Mozart and Beethoven. Yeah, and it was written just a few years ago, I think 2016. And yeah, I'm sure, you know, it's never been played in Quad Cities. I'm
A Quad City premiere, yeah.
Yes, premiere at the Figge, yes, for sure. Yeah, I thought it was a fun thing to tuck in there, and a nod to, you know, Beethoven's influence still.
Right, present,
later.
yeah. Present all the way to today. And of course, the beauty of a living composer is you can actually speak to them. And I think, Marian, you spoke to the composer, what, yesterday, you said?
Yeah, well, I actually, you know, I was trying to do some research on the piece, and all I could find was that you know, it was commissioned by this violin piano duo for their album on works inspired by Beethoven. But I really couldn't find that much, so I decided to, on a, you know, just to try to reach out to him to see if he'd respond. And I actually didn't even know if it was Jesse was a female or male, but he is male, and he's a professor from Oberlin College over at in Ohio, and he responded. Like, I wrote him last night, and he responded this morning. So the miracles of technology, I'm very grateful. And you know, as I suspected, you know, he was inspired by Beethoven's scherzos, which are very playful and oftentimes virtuosic. He did say that Beethoven is one of his most favorite composers, and he just loved. Well, first of all, I had recognized the theme, but I hadn't been able to put my finger on that theme, and he illuminated that the theme is from the last movement of a piano sonata. And I was looking through all the violin sonatas because these pieces were supposed to be inspired by the Beethoven's violin sonatas, but it was actually from a piano sonata that if I could play a little bit of and so that was kind of fun for him to illuminate for me where the source of inspiration came from. And he just loves the playfulness, and he kind of deconstructs this piece, and you hear little fragments of it being tossed between me and Naha. It's hard. It'll be fun to rehearse it, and and challenging because it goes at such a quick pace. But that's the fun character of the scherzo, that playful wittiness, and then there are parts of it that contrast and are slower, but not in a super serious way, kind of like with a wink and a nod, you know, and then he goes back on. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a real romp, I would say.
That's great. Yeah. I agree. I agree. Like with what you said, Naha, about, I think it really fits nicely between these two works. I mean, not that the Mozart's super long, but you know, the Mozart, which is a great opener, the Beethoven, which is pretty heavy. it's a nice way to tie the two together, and to hear a modern voice that's living and walking among us today. I think that's really powerful. So excited to hear that one. And I was looking at Jesse, and he seems to have done like an incredible amount of things, residencies, awards, and all sorts of things. So definitely worth, if you enjoy the piece, listening to it. There's a lot more on his website that might be worth checking out. So definitely look him up. And of course, you know, the main feature of this program, the Beethoven Sonata, violin sonata, I should say, since there are many Beethoven sonatas. Number 7 in C minor. Really kind of an epic piece. Like the Mozart written earlier in his career. I think he was maybe a little bit older. But you know, what makes this piece so special, and what's fun, you know, what's something fun about it that you guys enjoy in performance?
I'm really looking forward to putting this together with Marian. You know, we've collaborated a lot, and I think we've played maybe a couple Beethoven sonatas before. Yeah, Spring and Kreutzer, I think we've played. This is the first Opus 30 we'll have done together. And these are interesting set of sonatas. He wrote them very quickly in a short period of time. And interestingly, he collaborated with his violin teacher. My German's horrendous, so I'm going to mispronounce this, but Schuppenzie, I think is the violinist name. A man who was not that much older than Beethoven. They were around the same age. And he was a known interpreter of Haydn and Mozart. And so there's a thread there. And I was able to, you know, online see some of the manuscripts for these sonatas. Very interesting just to like see Beethoven's handwriting and be able to see some of the phrasing and interpretation shapes that seem just suggested by, you know, by his quill, by how he wrote in slurs and such. And they do still like hold, in a sense, to, you know, the historical piano with violin kind of form. The piano opens each movement and is echoed and followed by the violin. And in the manuscripts also, you can see where Schuppenzie might have, you know, looked over Beethoven's shoulder while they were reading through these sonatas and suggested a few edits. Like you could see cut and paste of bars inserted here and there, and some notes made. And Beethoven sonatas are a thing that, you know, you start learning, you start your journey in your high school years with your you know, earlier teachers. And my own teacher was a great interpreter of Beethoven sonatas and had his recordings out from, you know, when he was in the prime of his career. And so I feel a connection also to that kind of pedagogical lineage, even of Beethoven in his time, you know, turning to his teacher and getting input into his pieces that way.
Yeah, that's really neat.
Yeah, and for me as a pianist, the contrast between the Mozart violin sonatas and the Beethoven violin sonatas are really striking in terms of just pure sound, because, you know, Beethoven's piano was very different from Mozart's, right? Mozart only had a wooden piano, whereas Beethoven's piano, you start to see that he had the metal framed piano. And so the strings could hold more tension. And so as a result, Beethoven just had a greater amount of sound, pure volume available to him to inspire his compositions. And so, you know, when you look at a Mozart score, you do see some dynamics, you know, but they're scattered here and there. And but in Beethoven, he's a lot more explicit, and there are a lot more different, more dynamic changes that happen quicker, and therefore more dramatic. And so it's no surprise then that this, and the fact that he wrote it in C minor, Beethoven starts writing more pieces in minor as opposed to Mozart, who tended to write more in major. And that's really because the shift in the composers, the way they made a living, quite honestly. I tell my class, during Mozart's time, the composers still composed for either the church or the courts, right, royalty. So there's a certain kind of decorum they had to keep up. They couldn't be too depressing, right, because they're writing for, music to make people feel happy, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas Beethoven, he's considered the first freelance composer, and he working off of commissions by counts or barons and things like that. And so he had this freedom that Mozart didn't, where he could actually express anxiousness or anger or more human emotions deeper than previously, and his instrument allowed for him to express that. So I think that's also what makes the Beethoven sonata kind of stand out, because of the sheer volume of sound that he had for him that helped him create these incredible symphonies, right? Sorry, I didn't mean to talk so much. But
no need to apologize. That's what we're here for.
And it's a hallmark of, this, he's just entering his middle period, right? Beethoven has three: early period, middle period, and late period. And this is really at the very beginning of his middle period. And so it's very interesting to see. And then how he's, the classical sonatas have this form of exposition, repeated exposition, development, recapitulation. And so you start to see Beethoven kind of peeling away some of these formulas, which he really takes to another level in the late period. But even here in the violin sonata, the first movement, he doesn't repeat that exposition, which I'm really happy about, because I never like repeating the exposition.
That's fair. Yeah, no, that's great. And I mean, this is this sonata is pretty kind of symphonic in scope for a chamber work, for a duo, right? I mean, so I think it's going to be a really exciting finish. Before we sign off, is there one thing that each of you would recommend the audience listen for, or even like a favorite movement of yours in the Beethoven?
I love the second movement of the Beethoven. I think it's very heartfelt, and you can really like sink into it. There's a lot to put your teeth into, and it feels very warm.
Nice. How about you, Marian?
I love the last movement. It's so dramatic, and I love dramatic, emotional pieces, and so I really relate to that, and I think the audience will love it too.
Excellent. Well, there you have it. Thank you both for joining us on our Signature Series preview. Now you all in the audience have a little more insight on what our wonderful performers are thinking and working on, and some of their favorite pieces on the evening. So it'll be a really fun program. Like I said before, in-person tickets are sold out. Our limited in-person capacity is sold out. So luckily, we can provide digital access. So it's $25 per access. So you can live stream, which we'll live stream at the same time as the concert starting October 23rd at 7:30, and then we'll be available for 30 days after that. So definitely check that out. So you can call our box office at 563-322-7276, or go to QCSO qcsocc.org to get your digital access tickets today. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a good time enjoying our first WVIK QCSO Signature Series of the fall here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.